excited about today's talk. I have a good friend and I would say colleague, Charlie Ford, joining us today to talk about law enforcement asset management. Um, Charlie is currently the Director of Acquisitions, Property, and Safety for a federal law enforcement agency. He's responsible for the agency's real property and personal property asset management, contracting, environmental compliance, and occupational safety and health programs. Charlie previously performed similar duties for the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Air Force. He's a retired Air Force logistician. Thank you for your service, Charlie. In total, Charlie has 37 years of experience providing mission support services to operational elements of government organizations. I have known Charlie for a very long time and been able to collaborate on many different asset management initiatives, across the federal government. Definitely one of the most forward-thinking and innovative partners that we have in the federal sector. So I'm excited to have Charlie here to talk about law enforcement and asset management. Charlie, it's been a crazy 12 months. We've had obviously COVID, we've had social unrest, economic challenges. Can you talk about how your job has changed and how law enforcement asset management has changed with all of these factors? And maybe we start with just the COVID impact.
So sure, yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate your friendship and your collegialness there, Moshe. So really, things have significantly changed in our world. I got from a DoD background. We had people, systems, training, all those things necessary to run global logistics in place that we relied on. They were proven in peacetime, executed in wartime, and it was great. Well, coming into the law enforcement environment, from leaving the Department of Air Force to Homeland Security, it was completely different. Sometimes asset management, supply chain management, logistics functions, all of those things that you put together to create support to a mission, sometimes it takes a back seat. So the biggest thing that COVID has allowed for us in my area is highlights the importance of logistics to support mission operations. And for me, mission operations can be school teachers doing the job, could be hospitals doing the job, federal law enforcement agencies doing the job, or whatever. But it takes that symbiotic relationship to be healthy, and that you got to cultivate in order to produce what we need to do and get the mission done and accomplish it. So you got to be agile and flexible. But when, again, in law enforcement, at least from my two agencies I worked for, sometimes it wasn't the top priority. We wanted to go catch bad guys or whatever the case was. But through COVID, we've really been able to come into our own in our agency and say, you know what, we're here, we're professionals, we know what we're doing, we're value added to what you do, and we enable you to do what you do. So, everything from COVID, we had to transition to, online services. We had to automate everything, our contracting system to sign contracts. We had to enhance our asset management systems to be able to allow people to, sign property records or whatever the case is out in the field, when before, it was hard copies and things like that. So we ended up, we had to rapidly develop an enterprise solution, to be able to work in a COVID environment. We had to do a lot of rapid response that we hadn't done before in this agency anyways, and that includes, producing the capability to get rapid COVID testing across the nation, using credit cards and things like that, navigating the legal waters, what can we pay for? What does health insurance have to pay for? So we had to work through that. We had to work through learning, how does COVID affect the workforce? Looking at the CDC information, looking at the FDA information, OSHA regulations. We had to look at that and we had to say, wow, what are some of the ways we can help drive down events of COVID that's closing our buildings? And that included, doing contracts really quick for serial testing. What are the options out there? serial testing being, the idea is to look at things from a preventative perspective. If I can anticipate, if I know today that somebody's potentially has COVID, let me get them out of the workforce so they don't infect other people. So you do it on a weekly basis, a 10-day basis, or whatever. So contracting had to spring into action like never before. Heightened sensitivities. The people, they're concerned. They look at the news every day and they're afraid. If I go to work, am I going to get sick? Leadership. How am I taking care of my people? How can I feel confident that I'm doing the right thing? So you're navigating, political waters. You're just dealing with emotions. You're dealing with systems you're unfamiliar with, and you just keep plugging away. And that's what we've done, and we've been pretty successful actually, doing things we've never done before. So that's what I'd say.
And that was a lot. I think some themes that I heard there, and you started off with the statement, COVID really allowed asset management to come to the table, right, and be part of the conversation of mission execution. And prior to COVID, mission support and even asset management, infrastructure management took a back seat, as you said, to a degree, right? But given the environment that's been put in place, right, where your infrastructure is your health, the need for PPE, and I know we'll dive into that a bit, but being able to ensure that you can conduct the mission or whatever your mission may be through the right resources, because if you don't have the right resources, the N95 masks, hand sanitizer, rapid testing, the mission could stop. So I do want to seize upon a point you made on how asset management and that profession has been elevated during these times and has enabled more effective operations. PPE, I know for myself and many of the clients I serve, was essentially ground zero at the beginning of COVID, right? Where we had to ensure that everyone was obtaining PPE across the continental United States rapidly. We could account for that rapidly, and then acquire and distribute as the supply chain improved. But at least in the cases that I saw, and both from the commercial and public sector perspective, PPE was one of those things that weren't accounted for necessarily properly, right? And the processes that would be in place to account for it, to acquire or forecast weren't there. So it required a lot of solutions and a lot of innovation. And what I saw in the law enforcement environment, and I'm going to turn this back to you in a second, was due to the nature of law enforcement and the need to constantly react to scenarios that you can't plan for, whether that's terrorism or whether it's large disasters. There's the ability to quickly and in an agile way respond. And I think the example that you may share with how you responded and got PPE put in place with limited resources and infrastructure is probably very telling, right? And unique to a law enforcement asset management environment. Would you share any thoughts around that?
Yeah. So what I'd say, asset management, logistics, all of it, right? Everybody does it. They just don't necessarily realize it or call it that, right? When federal agents are planning an operation, right? They're thinking about how are we going to approach this business or this house, how are we going to organize ourselves, how are we trained, right? All of those things that we think about in the logistics world, to make sure we have a plan that we can at least the 80% solution, right? And we're adaptable when we go to execute it, so that's easy, and so the challenge is when you kind of more formalize asset management, we have to account for things. We have to look at the supply chain, we got to have control measures in place. So even though everybody, in one way or the other does things related to this, that's not their core function, right? So what we were able to do was come to the table with solutions. We did a lot of research because, hardly, when all of COVID started, people didn't know how we were going to respond. It's a pandemic. We have pandemic plans all over the place. We have coup plans all over the place, but it didn't really necessarily prepare us for what we ended up dealing with, right? So when we first got approached, right, it was because, I had to say, look, as asset managers, as logisticians, we're a critical part to our emergency response, our continuity of operations planning, right? Give it to us. Let us take care of this for you. You focus on protecting the workforce. You focus on continuing our mission, fighting crime, So what we were able to do is take our expertise to the next level by offering solutions one layer at a time, going up the chain to eventually, it became fairly routine that we were working face to face with the head of our agency, solving problems, and they're like, wow, honestly, it was kind of amazing because, coming from DOD and DHS, being such large organizations, I'm in a fairly small organization, comparatively speaking, but they recognize these things already, but coming here, getting to the table to provide solutions. That's what I believe we are. We're solution providers, right? It was just amazing. And so once that happened, right, when they saw the value of what we have, of this profession, to take care of business, I guess you could say, to be agile, to be flexible, they were able to recognize that. And since then, God, I can't tell you the different programs, whether it's improving our fleet management programs, our facilities management programs, we're reducing the footprint. Just in this year, we got legs on all of those major projects that are going to save taxpayer dollars. At the same time, modernizing what we do. So for managing PPE and things like that, we had to jump in and say, okay, how are we going to control this? There's a competitive market out there. Everyone is looking for the same things. They're looking for the same mask, they're looking for the same, rubber gloves, those kind of things, everything. So how are we going to control this? So we're not the only federal law enforcement agency out there, and not to mention, every other occupation is looking for these kind of things. So the market got pretty tough. So, we had to determine, how are we going to track this? How are we going to validate the need? How are we going to put, manage our stock levels and our resupply order points and things like that? That was all created on the fly, but really it all came from kind of knowing what we're doing and then showing our value, talking about it, and then doing what we promised. It went to our credibility. And I would say, as asset managers, our credibility in what we do and how it relates to the bottom line is one of the most important things we can do. And so that's how we did it. We just plugged away and we took it seriously and we took care of business.
Yeah. I heard you mention value a few times, and I know all of our ISO 55000 certified professionals on the phone, their ears are ringing because that is the, essentially the outcome of good asset management. And ISO 55000 asset management is delivering value to the organization. And what I'm hearing you state is, this environment enabled you to articulate the value and offer more opportunities to bring value to your organization, through a myriad of ways. And the culture that I think you've established within your organization, and what we see within the asset management profession, is a solution-driven culture, right? We're constantly, pandemic or not, solving problems within the organization, right? Whether that's the roof is falling in, or I need to move resources quickly from this city to that city because there's a change in a threat environment, or a change in whatever mission pattern. It's an agile culture, and it's an agile industry and profession. So when given the opportunity to show value and to articulate, another point within ISO 55000 is communicating that value back to the leadership, right? And having leadership buy-in so that you can come back and start making investments that garner larger value. So I'm hearing, COVID was a place where you can show that example and was needed, and then by example, utilize that in a way to articulate other means of bringing value back to your leadership, because you've proven yourself and you show you can essentially do it. So, a lot of the concepts of ISO 55000, are essentially stated there. Um, what were some of the challenges that you think you face that other individuals or law enforcement, state and local law enforcement, or federal law enforcement could benefit from, hearing how you overcame them? Anything, jump out? There was a big change in the operating environment from, on-site to remote. Some tips do you think you could share, Charlie?
So I would say one of the biggest things, and again, it goes to the credibility and the value proposition, right? Is being almost an afterthought, right? And coming in and showing what we can do for our operational elements, right? Coming to the table. The biggest thing was that credibility, that experience, that advice we could give to our leadership, that in the eyes of our customer or our field operations, right? I'm at a headquarters level, right? So in the eyes of our field operations, where they never necessarily came to us before, they come to us now. Over this past year, they're like, holy cow, what we've been missing out. I have issues right now where one of our largest programs, I mean, I'm not gonna go into the program, but we're kind of hanging our hat on this program, purely like an operational support kind of function, intel driven kind of stuff. And they've never called us. And they just went on, they contacted my contracting office and they said, hey, we want this, right? Not clearly defined requirements or anything else. But through this process, once we identified, hey, there's some challenges here, through the integrated logistics support needs, right? They're like, wow, I heard you guys are good, so we appreciate you calling us, right? And so to me, from a taxpayer value perspective, we're transforming business, if not products, but transforming business operations to create value. That's kind of what I believe value is. Is what are you doing to transform something to make it worth more? And effectively, in these struggling times, with resources, getting people on board and getting financing and stuff like that, you have to be able to show that you can create that value so they keep you around. So they give you the people you need so you can do other products. I spend a lot of my time in my job saying, if I can get the resources for X, I can save you this much. I've got, several projects. I got one project that I'm looking at a $35 million savings, another $16 million savings. These are over 10 years, multiple things like that I couldn't, coming from other larger organizations, I was ready to do these things 4 years ago when I got my current position. But the lack of situational awareness of what we do as asset managers, I couldn't get any legs on it. But I have legs on every one of those projects now, and I've been given more money to do things to create that value for the agency than I could have ever dreamed of. So that's the one thing, and that all goes to your credibility, your expertise. So for us as asset managers, investing in training, having conversations like this, doing webinars, learning from others, our colleagues, that's where we gain so we can serve our customers up, down, horizontally in the chain.
Yeah, I think, one thing you're also touching upon that is, a big buzzword and obviously an emphasis in the federal sector right now is evidence-based policy making, right? Evidence-based decision making. And what I'm hearing you say is that you're not just walking in the door with credibility because of the actions that you've taken. You're also walking the door with your homework done, right? With the data and the information that will back that investment and back the decision making, right? So, data-based decision making. Can you talk about the importance of, utilizing data, doing your homework, and then articulating that value proposition back to your leadership.
Yeah. So in my for me, Charlie Ford, right? All the theories, the frameworks, all of those things, those are great. But those are just a baseline, right? Even getting the data, bad data, whatever, it doesn't really matter. That's just part of the problem, right? So being able to convert that information, right, and to use those frameworks, those methodologies, those policies, and all that to recommend options, right, with usually hopefully one preferred, right? That's what you get from all of the systems that we use. So for us, we struggled. We have a huge bow wave, for example, not only on a fleet, our vehicle fleet, but our IT, our facilities leases and all of those things. And up until I was able to get the support again through the COVID environment, right? You know, I I didn't really have the the logistics information systems, the asset management systems that I needed to really integrate things, right? To really be able to convert data to useful information to provide recommendations, right? And so, but since, we've pretty well integrated our human resources system to our asset management system. We've integrated our financial system to our asset management system. We've included leasing and building operations information into our asset management system. We've implemented different kind of supply mechanisms that we needed, for example, to track PPE for COVID, right?
Right.
All of those things, right? So where we have an enterprise system that we can actually pull from, look at it from different perspectives, look at the metrics, the KPIs and things like that. So now when we go to the table, when I say, hey, well, I doubled, for example, for facilities, right? I doubled my budget this year, right? Because of that data, because we had a huge bow wave of leases expiring and we were coming in and our extensions that we were doing through GSA and everything were expiring. This all was creating, we're looking at 10, 15-year leases and stuff, right? And we came in, I'm like, we can't sustain this. And I've told them that for 4 years. But until I could get that data, I just kept getting the same budget amount. And it actually went up and down by millions of dollars every year. But on average, is X. Well, I've done, doubled that now this year because I took that data. I said, look, this is what's going to happen if we don't do something now, right?
Yeah.
That's the value of data. The same thing for my fleet. I almost doubled my fleet budget this year to buy new vehicles to replace them, all because of that data. That's the value, and the agency will be better off for it. It'll help focus where they put their investments. There's a finite total budget. And in most law enforcement, well, I can speak for DHS and I can speak for my current agency. It's like 66 or so percent of our entire budget goes to salary and benefits. People, that doesn't leave us with much to do things that we need to do. And there's a lot of things we need to do. So to be able to, as an asset manager, to come in and say, you know what, I don't think you should invest in that. I get that that's maybe a great, I don't know, information system to support certain law enforcement things or
Right.
certain HR functions, but to be able to say, you're going to get a better return on your investment if you put it in your vehicles, in your buildings, those kind of things, whatever the case is, because people use that every day and they're not going to be able to do your mission if they don't have it. If they don't have a car to drive or a gun to, to protect themselves or whatever the case is, they're not going to be able to do the core mission. So let's change the focus here and think about it.
And I would say, I know Nick's going to come on in a second and interject. One of the most overlooked aspects of data is the accountability that it brings in articulating a message to regulators or to leadership, right? Because when you actually put the numbers down, you interpret it and state, as a result of these aging assets, right? As the result of the inoperability that's coming due to the fact that these budgets have been, underfunded for years for X reason, this is the implication that will happen. And the implication could be you will not have assets that enable you to go on patrols, to have facilities that will house, people during emergencies or disasters, and articulating that message clearly and putting that in paper with evidence-based data, right? Ultimately shifts the accountability both from oneself to the people that are funding it, right? And now all of a sudden they have to take action, and it's a decision. It's a trade-off that obviously there are other considerations that are made during trade-offs, and that should be documented. But they are now part of the process, right? They are part of the decision framework that says, if I don't do fund X, this will be the implication because we wrote it down, right?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, but I would expand that a little bit more in saying that your users, not just your leadership that are making those decisions on where to invest, but your users, they get a better understanding and they have more buy-in. But they also, some of my biggest wins is because my customers have supported me. They,
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time lobbying them to say, hey, how can I help? Or would it be better if we did X? And would that be more helpful to your mission? Right. And they're like, heck yeah. So now I've just expanded my network of influence up the chain because now I have, my customers who are talking also. And it's not just Charlie Ford and his staff.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Guys, this has been great. I just want to take a minute to offer a brief closing and then ask you a question, Charlie. But just for those that only had the half an hour, we're so grateful that you joined us today. And let me just briefly say a thank you to, again, our patrons, ABS Quality Valuations and Onuma, and then other organizational members, of which Grant Thornton is one. And we are just so grateful that for the support of all of these organizations, because we need that support to do this. And lastly, just a plug for next week, we have Amber Propert, and that will be on February 18th at the same time, 4 p.m. Eastern. So we hope to see you all there. And if anyone has any questions, comments, follow-up, feel free to email any of us personally, or webinar@assetleadership.net is a good email as well. And then Charles, if you have a few minutes, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So it would be, are there a few must-do activities when coming on board as an asset manager at a law enforcement organization, just for people who aren't really aware?
So one is going to depend on the law enforcement organization. Okay. So in DHS, we had a decentralized kind of model. Okay. So we had offices, had 21 locations out in the field. I worked for United States Border Patrol then. Okay. And so we had offices out in the field, right? And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. Now, where I work now, it's all centralized. Okay. So here's the difference. Okay. So out in the field, when you're decentralized, people kind of start off at a lower grade, lower pay, because they're doing the tactical level work, right? They're doing inventory and those kind of things. All right. We're here, we have to find a balance at our headquarters because we're centralized. We need to have people that can do the tactical work, but also do the policy and procedures kind of work, right? So the first thing is, if you don't have experience through the military or some other organization, right, then you're going to probably need to start an organization, right, who has field organizations that are going to come in at the lower kind of GS levels, right, and then we'll train you. When I was in Border Patrol, I hired lots of people that I trained, right, and we were able to do that. We had more time and things like that. Whereas to come to work for me, we're going to have higher graded positions because I have to have somebody that can kind of do a little bit of all of it, right? And so that's going to be one thing to consider. Another thing that's going to need to be considered is, especially, having prior experience. What kind of experience is that, right? There's different things I look for. Maybe it's readiness, maybe it's planning, maybe it's analysis, or whatever the case is, right? So kind of becoming a understanding everything, or at least being exposed or reading about it, participating in things like this to kind of understand the world of asset management. That's going to give you a leg up. And then certainly, even though a college degree is not required, but for about half of my positions, so contracting officers, my engineers, architects, safety people, they environmental people require college degrees. But for traditional, real estate, asset management, personal property, asset management kind of stuff, then, a background in supply management, supply chain, or logistics type functions, I'm certainly, a guy like me would be interested in someone like that. So, informal or formal education and training, a little bit of experience. If not, then you look for a position in a field unit where we can train you, right? And you start at the basics and you work.
Awesome.
Hopefully that answered the question.
That was great. Thanks a lot. And one more question, just how did you guys meet and what have you worked on together over the years?
So we met at Border Patrol. Moshe was doing working on the fleet program for Border Patrol, and so that's an easy one for me to talk about. I just wasn't allowed to talk about where I work right now. But over there, I think at the time we had like 22,000 vehicles. A lot of executive orders came down, right? And that's just in my agency. Moshe was working it for all of Customs and Border Protection. But we had a huge fleet, a lot of maintenance challenges, a lot of data challenges, a lot of getting parts for maintenance. We had like 54 maintenance garages out in the field, right? So he got hired on, contracted through GT to work on how we going to fix this, right? How are we going to help the agency get a handle on the executive orders and everything else that were coming down, and to get that unique specialized skill set that you get from contracting, right? I can have jack of all trades, but I don't necessarily have experts in, certain fields, right? And so from there, he came over one day and he wanted to talk about the Border Patrol's fleet, and we just hit it off, we just both love what we do, right? And we just hit it off, and that sparked a relationship. Moshe, you can add to that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because Charlie did not make it easy at first. I actually remember the exact moment that we met. We sat in his office, and I was talking to Charlie about strategic sourcing and asset management. He says, "Well, tell me, what do you know about strategic sourcing?" Then we talked about Lean Six Sigma. He says, "Well, break down Lean Six Sigma." And then he starts having me compare, different acquisition methods. So I had to run through Charlie's gamut to prove, knowledge in relevant supply chain areas. But after we got through that and we're able to, do a lot of fun initiatives and a lot of data-driven initiatives, metrics-driven, we changed the operating environment with the help of a lot of great people like CBP and U.S. Border Patrol, and it's still going on today. So that's when it started. We collaborated on this law enforcement asset management working group, right? Through ALN being the medium to bring together all these players, where we brought them across DHS and then DOJ, thanks to Charlie. So a lot of great initiatives have happened, and I think we'll continue that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here today, and thanks everyone for listening in. And I'll leave a closing word to you two, and we'll sign off from there.
Well, Charlie, thanks for agreeing to join the discussion on law enforcement and asset management. I know that we could probably sit here all day and talk about it, which is fantastic. So we'll save round two for another date to come in another venue. But really appreciate you, sharing your thoughts with everybody.
Yeah, I was happy to be here. Thank you for the invite. And, just for anybody out there, especially just is beginning their career, pursuing a career in this, is when I first went in the military, this isn't what I wanted to do. I didn't even know what it was, but over time I realized, wow, I can make a significant impact to what we're doing. And I embraced that, right? And I learned, and I went to school to learn, and it's worked out well for me. It's a fantastic field to be in because every single business in non-governmental organization, government organization has to have asset managers. There's not everything you can say that about in a career field. So, think about pursuing a career in that.
Charles, that's a great way to end things. Thank you guys so much, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.